A poised black woman strides into an ultra-luxury car showroom. She's here to buy a Rolls-Royce. But before she can even finish her request, the owner steps forward not just to refuse her, but to mock her. His laughter is sharp, his arrogance unwavering. And when he finally smirks and calls security to escort her out, the doors swing open, sealing her fate, or so he thinks. What he doesn't know is that she's no ordinary woman. She's a billionaire, and she's about to change everything. The gleaming showroom of Imperial Motors shimmered under the warm afternoon light, its floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing rows of luxury vehicles, each polished to perfection. Beneath the grand chandelier hanging from the high ceiling, the air carried a crisp scent of leather and wax, a fragrance of opulence that only those accustomed to wealth truly recognized. The latest Rolls-Royce Phantom sat prominently in the center, its deep obsidian finish absorbing the light like a void of absolute power. Every inch of the space radiated exclusivity, a place where deals were made over whispered conversations, and a flick of the pen added six-figure cars to collections without hesitation. As Celesta Harrington walked through the glass doors, the soft click of her designer heels against the marble floor was barely noticed amidst the quiet hum of polite conversations between well-dressed men in tailored suits and the delicate laughter of young women draped in couture. She carried herself with effortless grace, her silk blouse tucked seamlessly into a fitted pencil skirt, her jewelry understated but unmistakably expensive. Her presence commanded attention, yet not in the way that it should have. The moment she entered, a shift in energy rippled through the room, not of admiration, but of unspoken skepticism, the kind that came from a space accustomed to an unwritten exclusivity. From behind the grand sales counter, Gordon Whitman, the owner of Imperial Motors, leaned against the polished wood, his arms crossed in easy arrogance as he chatted with a well-known investor. He barely registered Celeste at first, dismissing her with a glance before continuing his conversation, his laughter punctuated by the clinking of ice swirling in a glass of whiskey. The other customers, mostly older white men with sharp eyes and the self-assurance of generational wealth, glanced at Celeste, some with subtle amusement, others with veiled curiosity. A black woman alone in this showroom, dressed exquisitely yet still an anomaly. Unbothered, Celeste moved through the space with the precision of someone who had walked into many rooms like this before, rooms where her presence was questioned before she even spoke, where her worth was always measured in assumptions rather than facts. She approached the Phantom, running her fingers lightly along its pristine hood, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingertips. A masterpiece of engineering, a statement of quiet dominance, just the kind of vehicle she preferred. A disapproving cough broke the air behind her. "Ma'am," a clipped voice drawled. She turned to see Gordon, his eyes sweeping her in a calculated assessment. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile people like him gave when they believed they were humoring someone beneath them. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at our pre-owned location across town. We have a selection of vehicles that might be more in line with what you're looking for." Celeste's expression remained unreadable. The only movement was the slight tilt of her head, as if considering whether the insult was even worth acknowledging. "I know exactly what I'm looking for," she replied smoothly. "And it's this Phantom. I'd like to hear more about its customization options." Gordon exhaled sharply through his nose, as if amused by the absurdity of the request. "You're aware this model starts at over $600,000, correct?" he said, his tone dripping with condescension, emphasizing each syllable as though speaking to someone unfamiliar with the concept of such wealth. Celeste didn't blink. "I am." Gordon's smirk deepened. He turned slightly, addressing one of his salesmen over his shoulder. "Charlie, we really need to screen our walk-ins better," he said, shaking his head before returning his gaze to Celeste. "This particular car is for a certain type of clientele, if you understand my meaning." A few lingering customers exchanged glances, smirks playing at their lips as if waiting to see how this scene would unfold. This was their game, an unspoken ritual of power, a subtle but deliberate act of exclusion. Celeste's spine straightened ever so slightly, but her voice remained measured. "And what type of clientele is that, Mr. Whitman?" Gordon's smile widened, enjoying the game. "The kind that doesn't waste our time." Silence. For a fraction of a second, the room seemed to hold its breath, watching, waiting for Celeste to either shrink under the weight of the insult or lash out in a way that would justify their perception of her. Instead, she laughed, a soft, knowing sound that carried just enough amusement to be unsettling. She tilted her head, letting the moment stretch, letting him sit in his own ignorance before responding. "You're wasting it right now." The shift was instant. The laughter from the other customers faded into an uneasy murmur. Gordon's amusement flickered, momentarily caught off guard by her calm defiance. His gaze hardened. "Look, lady, I don't have time for this. I don't know how you got in here, but you need to leave before this becomes uncomfortable for everyone." His tone darkened, the thin veneer of politeness slipping to reveal something far less refined. Celeste didn't move. Didn't so much as blink. "Uncomfortable," she repeated, her voice carrying just enough authority to remind him that she was not the one who should be uncomfortable. Gordon exhaled sharply, rolling his eyes as if he were dealing with a persistent child. Security. He motioned lazily toward the guard station near the entrance. The two uniformed men hesitated. They were used to escorting out rowdy customers, intoxicated guests, not well-dressed women standing their ground in absolute, unwavering confidence. Celeste simply watched as they approached, her expression impassive, letting the moment stretch long enough for the discomfort to settle over the showroom like a weighted blanket. Then she spoke. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor." The words were deliberate, measured. A test. Gordon's laugh was sharp and cruel. "I own this dealership," he declared, his chest puffing out in pride. "And I'm asking you to leave. Now." He stepped closer, voice lowering. "Or I'll make sure you do." Still, Celeste didn't move. Her silence was its own power, forcing Gordon to reveal himself for what he truly was. His face darkened further. "Fine," he snapped. "You want to act like a problem? I'll treat you like one." He pulled his phone from his pocket, fingers tapping the screen with deliberate precision. A slow smirk tugged at his lips as he pressed the call button. "Yes, I need officers at Imperial Motors immediately. I have a suspicious individual refusing to leave my business." Celeste's jaw remained set, but behind her calm exterior, something shifted, a flicker of something deeper, something colder. A part of her that had seen this before, had prepared for this moment her entire life. As Gordon snapped his phone shut, his smirk widening in satisfaction, he had no idea that he had just sealed his own fate. "And Celeste Harrington?" She just smiled. The tension in Imperial Motors thickened like a storm cloud as Celeste stood motionless, her expression unreadable, her presence a deliberate defiance against the unspoken rules of this space. The weight of Gordon Whitman's arrogance pressed down on the room, his smirk widening as he pocketed his phone, assured in his belief that within moments she would be humiliated, forcibly removed like an unwelcome intruder. The other customers shifted their attention, some pretending to be absorbed in their discussions while sneaking sidelong glances, others outright smirking, waiting to see how this little spectacle would unfold. Minutes passed, each second stretching like a taut wire ready to snap. The rhythmic ticking of an ornate clock on the showroom wall was the only sound punctuating the tense silence, until the distant but unmistakable wail of sirens cut through the air. Celeste, still poised and unbothered, watched Gordon's face with a knowing patience, waiting for the inevitable moment when he would realize exactly who he had just crossed. The doors burst open. Two uniformed officers strode in, their expressions unreadable but businesslike. Officer Reynolds, a burly man with a sharp, assessing gaze, led the way while Officer Dawson, younger, with a tense jawline, followed close behind. Gordon immediately stepped forward, taking charge as if he were orchestrating a well-rehearsed performance. "There she is," he announced, motioning toward Celeste with the exaggerated confidence of someone who had never been questioned. "She's refusing to leave, disturbing customers. I have reason to believe she's here under suspicious pretenses." His voice dropped on the last words, deliberately vague yet weighted with implication. Celeste said nothing. She simply watched. Reynolds turned toward her, his gaze momentarily flicking over her impeccable attire, her poise, the absence of any actual disruption. He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough for Gordon to press further. "I'm asking you to remove her immediately." Reynolds exhaled, shifting slightly, already sensing the misstep in this scenario, but unwilling to challenge it outright. "Mom," he started, his tone more cautious than aggressive, "we've been called here for a trespassing issue. Do you have any business here?" Celeste, finally breaking her silence, turned toward him, her voice as smooth as polished steel. "I was inquiring about the purchase of a Rolls-Royce Phantom. The owner of this establishment refused service, made assumptions about my financial status, and when I requested to speak to a supervisor, he chose instead to call the police." Her words were measured, calculated, each syllable deliberate. A flicker of something discomfort, perhaps even doubt, crossed Officer Dawson's face, but Gordon scoffed loudly, waving his hand dismissively. "That's ridiculous. I don't have time for this nonsense. I want her removed. Now." Reynolds stiffened. The shift in tone from polite condescension to outright hostility was subtle but revealing. Celeste saw it too. The officers had been called expecting a disturbance, a threat, a situation requiring containment, not a woman who held herself with more dignity than the man barking orders. But the power of assumptions was stronger than the weight of logic. Reynolds' hand moved toward the cuffs at his belt. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." A hush fell over the showroom. Celeste's body remained still, but something in her eyes flickered, something deep, colder than anger, sharper than indignation. She could have fought back, could have insisted on her rights, demanded to speak to legal representation. But instead she let it happen. The metallic clink of the cuffs locking around her wrists echoed in the vast space, bouncing off the polished walls, louder than it should have been. The guards watched in uneasy silence, and even the customers who had once smirked shifted uncomfortably, the reality of what they were witnessing too stark to ignore. Gordon grinned, reveling in the moment, in the power of it. "Next time," he said, his voice loud enough to ensure that every last person in the room heard, "know your place." Celeste met his gaze as she was led toward the doors, the wine-colored silk of her blouse catching the harsh showroom lights, pooling around her restrained arms like a quiet rebellion. And then, just before stepping outside, she did something that would haunt Gordon far longer than the lawsuit, longer than the headlines, longer than the irreversible damage he had just inflicted upon himself. The police cruiser cut through the streets of Manhattan, its flashing lights casting streaks of red and blue against the glass and steel of the towering skyline. Celeste sat in the back, her wrists bound in cold steel, her posture impossibly straight, her expression unreadable. The soft hum of the city filtered in through the barred windows, a stark contrast to the quiet tension in the car. Officer Reynolds stole a glance at her through the rearview mirror, his grip on the wheel tightening ever so slightly, a flicker of something doubt, maybe even unease crossing his features. He had expected resistance, shouting, indignation. Instead, she sat there, composed, patient, like a queen waiting for the inevitable shift of power. The precinct was sterile, humming with the low chatter of officers processing paperwork, the occasional clatter of a phone ringing. The booking officer barely looked up as Celeste was led inside, muttering through the routine questions, her presence an anomaly among the usual parade of criminals and vagrants. A fingerprint scan, a mug shot, her wrists released from the cuffs but left sore beneath the delicate fabric of her blouse. She was placed in a holding area, a cold metal bench against a cement wall, and left there without a word. She didn't move, didn't fidget, didn't react. She waited. And then, 20 minutes later, the door opened. Michael Harrington Jr. stepped inside, moving with the kind of quiet, deliberate control that turned heads in courtrooms alike. His tailored suit, dark and crisp, carried the weight of power, his movements precise, predatory. The officer who had let him in cleared his throat awkwardly. "She hasn't been formally charged yet. It's—" Michael didn't look at him. His gaze was locked onto his mother, taking her in, cataloging every detail, the sharp crease of her skirt, the absence of any visible distress, the way her hands remained neatly folded in her lap as if this was nothing more than an inconvenience, an expected one. He exhaled slowly, not out of relief but something colder. "Leave us," he said, his voice measured, but there was something in it that made the officer hesitate, nod, and step out without argument. The door shut with a muted click. Michael crossed the room, crouching slightly in front of her, his sharp brown eyes scanning her face for the cracks that weren't there. "Tell me you didn't let them put you in cuffs," he murmured, "and it wasn't a question." Celeste let out a quiet, knowing hum, a ghost of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Of course I did," she said smoothly, tilting her head slightly, eyes gleaming. "You know how men like Whitman operate. The only way to make them overplay their hand is to let them believe they've already won. Michael exhaled through his nose, his jaw tightening. He had spent his entire career taking men like Gordon Whitman apart, brick by brick, law by law, tearing down the arrogance that shielded them from consequences. But this wasn't just a case, this was his mother, and no amount of legal expertise could dull the sharp sting of seeing her treated like this. Celeste reached out, placing a single manicured hand against his wrist, steady, deliberate. "Don't let emotion cloud strategy," she reminded him softly. "This isn't about me. It never was." Michael let the tension settle into something more focused. He straightened, adjusting the platinum cufflinks at his wrist, the ones Celeste had given him after he won his first major lawsuit. His voice was like steel when he spoke. "You won't be charged. I already made the call. A beat. But that's not enough." Celeste's smile widened, slow and lethal. "No," she agreed, "it's not." Michael glanced toward the door, then back to her, his mind already working, already calculating the next move. "You let him think he had the upper hand." Celeste nodded. "And now, we show him what it costs to mistake silence for submission." The wheels were already turning. Imperial Motors would regret ever making the call that had placed her in this seat. And Gordon Whitman. He would never see it coming. The next morning, Gordon Whitman strode into his office at Imperial Motors, feeling triumphant, his polished Oxfords tapping confidently against the marble floor. The events of the previous day played in his mind like a highlight reel. Celeste Harrington, standing there in her silk blouse, thinking she belonged, only to be escorted out in handcuffs. The memory sent a surge of satisfaction through him. He had made his point. The morning light streamed through the expansive glass walls of his office as he settled into his Italian leather chair, reaching for his coffee, savoring the quiet hum of the showroom below. Everything was as it should be. His dealership, his rules, his clientele. That woman had been a minor inconvenience, an anomaly that had been swiftly dealt with. Then his phone rang. His assistant's voice came through, tight with unease. "Mr. Whitman, there's a Mr. Harrington here to see you. He says he has an appointment." Gordon frowned, the name stirring something in the back of his mind, but he dismissed it just as quickly. He didn't recall any appointment, but whoever this man was, he could wait. He took a slow sip of his coffee, deliberately letting the seconds drag before finally responding, "Send him in." The office door swung open, and Michael Harrington Jr. stepped inside. Tall, composed, and radiating quiet power, Michael moved with the kind of effortless authority that turned heads in boardrooms and courtrooms alike. His tailored Tom Ford suit fit with precision, a platinum watch glinting subtly at his wrist, exuding the kind of wealth that came not from inheritance, but from mastery. Gordon's instinctive confidence faltered for a second as he took in the man before him. There was something unsettling about the way Michael assessed him, a predator taking stock of its prey. Still, Gordon recovered quickly, leaning back in his chair with forced ease. "Mr. Harrington," he greeted, stretching out the syllables, feigning familiarity. "What can I do for you?" Michael didn't sit. He placed a thick, leather-bound folder onto Gordon's desk with calculated precision, his fingers tapping once against the surface before he spoke. "I believe you met my mother yesterday," he said, his voice smooth, even. Gordon's smirk faltered. Michael continued, opening the folder and sliding the first set of documents forward. "This is a notice of legal action against Imperial Motors for discrimination, false imprisonment, and defamation. My firm has already compiled witness statements, security footage, and documentation of prior incidents in which you or your staff denied service to minority clients under questionable pretenses." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle, heavy as a gavel striking wood. Gordon's fingers tightened around the armrests of his chair. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed, though the bravado in his voice had thinned. "Your mother caused a disturbance. I had every right." Michael's chuckle was quiet, controlled, lethal. "You had every right," he repeated, tilting his head slightly. "That's interesting because the Consumer Protection Bureau disagrees." He slid another document forward. "A formal complaint has already been filed, and I imagine the Civil Rights Commission will take a particular interest in this case as well." Gordon's face reddened, his carefully maintained arrogance cracking at the edges. "Now, wait just a damn minute." Michael held up a hand, silencing him with a mere gesture. "Mr. Whitman, he said, his tone polite but edged with steel. "I don't engage in pointless conversations. So, let's get to the part that really matters." Another folder appeared on the desk. Gordon hesitated before glancing at it, his pulse spiking as he scanned the first few lines. His throat went dry. Michael leaned in slightly, dropping his voice just enough to make the room feel too small, too suffocating. "As of this morning," he said, savoring the words, "Harrington Capital now owns a controlling stake in Renwick Holdings. You may not recognize the name, but you should, because Renwick Holdings is the parent company of Imperial Motors." Silence. Gordon's face drained of color. His stomach twisted violently as realization set in, horror clawing up his spine. Michael's smile was polite, almost amused. "Let me make it simple for you, Mr. Whitman," he said, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. "You don't own this dealership anymore. I do." Gordon's world tilted. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "You're lying," he croaked, reaching blindly for his keyboard, frantically pulling up financial reports, stock listings, his hands trembling slightly as the numbers confirmed everything. The buyout had already happened. The company had shifted beneath his feet without him even knowing. Michael exhaled, feigning sympathy. "It's fascinating. Really, how easy it is to acquire a failing business when its owner is too preoccupied with their own ego to see the danger right in front of them." Gordon's breath came shallow, rapid. He had spent his life building this, his dealership, his empire, and in the span of a single day it had been ripped away from him. Michael straightened, gathering the remaining documents, his tone now almost dismissive. "You'll be hearing from the corporate board this afternoon," he said. "Your termination paperwork is already being drafted. I suggest you use this time to pack up your belongings." He turned toward the door, pausing just before exiting. "Oh, and one more thing." Gordon, still in shock, barely looked up. Michael's smile sharpened. "My mother decided to purchase a Rolls-Royce elsewhere," he said, his voice mockingly casual. "Actually, she bought two, one for herself, one for me. I'll be sure to drive past here occasionally, just to admire the view." And with that, he left. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing Gordon Whitman inside his own personal ruin. His legacy, his business, his power gone. All because he had made one fatal mistake. He had underestimated the wrong woman. Gordon sat frozen, the weight of his downfall pressing against his chest like a vice. The office that once felt like an empire now felt like a cage, the walls closing in, suffocating. The hum of the showroom outside continued, oblivious to the ruin unfolding behind these glass walls. He had spent his life believing he was untouchable, that power belonged only to those who looked like him, spoke like him, moved in the circles he deemed worthy. And yet, in mere hours he had lost everything. Outside, Imperial Motors was changing. By noon, corporate representatives arrived, new management, new policies, a complete restructuring. Employees whispered in hushed voices, eyes darting toward Gordon's office, where the man who once ruled this place now sat, a shadow of his former self. By evening, the press had the story. It spread like wildfire. Headlines blared across news outlets, social media erupted. Luxury dealership faces discrimination lawsuit. CEO of Harrington Capital acquires Imperial Motors after racial profiling incident. Arrogance costs Gordon Whitman everything. There were videos. Witnesses from the showroom came forward. The footage of Celeste Harrington's arrest poised, composed, unshaken, circulated with millions of views. People watched. People reacted. People remembered. And Celeste? She sat in the driver's seat of her new Rolls-Royce Phantom, the engine humming beneath her fingertips, smooth as silk. The city skyline stretched before her, a testament to every battle she had fought and won. As she pulled onto Fifth Avenue, she passed Imperial Motors, the once pristine showroom now dimmed under the weight of scandal. The name on the glass remained for now, but everything inside belonged to her. A slow, knowing smile played at her lips. Justice, when served correctly, was never loud. It was elegant. It was inevitable. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.